I understand that he went to the Lycée Français in Barcelona. So probably his French is way better than mine. I just pick it up watching French series on TV, so I don't even dare to try and speak French. He's an economist by training, and he's certainly one of the greatest contributors to the debate about independence of regional entities, and I think that it is particularly important for our community to listen to a voice like that these days where a broader integration or expansion of the European Union implies that we need to give attention to diversity and to the uniqueness of different constituencies. So I think this is really a timely event. We also know that Catalonia is clearly an economic driver for Spain. Being Italian and being Italy, a country where you have different regions with different economic development speeds, I know how important that is, how important it is to pay attention to the needs of a region which is basically the economic engine of a country. So without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Mas, and then, of course, to our two MBA participants, Stephanie and Augusti, who will possibly moderate the debate. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you very much, Artur Mas, for being with us, and welcome in HEC Paris.
Okay. So I would also like to take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone who's in here. I know it's a complicated week because officially in France we're on holidays, and thank you for the offer of coming here for this conference. I propose that we start with a short introduction about Artur Mas, the key dates, apart from what has already been said by Andrea, our dean. So just to get some key dates. So first of all, Artur Mas, who was born in Barcelona in 1956, he started his political life in the 80s, in 1992, where he started in the political career in the Department of Trade, Consumer Affairs and Tourism. Then afterwards, he changed the department for the City Council in Barcelona. It was also still in the 80s. It was from 1987 to 1995. And then we start with the Catalan Parliament Live, which started in 1995 to 2016. He started responsible of the of the opposition party at that time. And then in 2000, if I'm not right, 2002, he was 2010, sorry, he was elected president of Catalonia, and he was president of Catalonia from 2010 until 2016 of this year. So we're going to organize the conference in here. You will have some slides. We're going to organize the conference in 4 different blocks, as you will see. So first of all, to talk about investment is very important, first of all, that we understand what we are talking to, what we are talking about. So first of all, we will talk about a little about Catalonia. Then we will talk about the pro-independence movement. And then we will talk about financing Catalonia and the crisis in Spain. And then finally, we'll talk about investment in Catalonia. So I propose that we start with the first block. Before asking the first question to Mr. Mas, I would like just to give you some key figures. I won't talk about numbers. I think it's very important to understand that we compare. And we compare what is Catalonia. So Catalonia has a similar area in terms of square kilometers than Belgium. It has a GDP similar to Finland, and it's big. It's higher than Greece and Portugal, and it has a population which is similar to Switzerland. And finally, the GDP per person, it's very similar to the one of European of the 28 member states. So given this introduction, I leave the floor to Stephanie to start with the first question of the first block.
Okay, so for the first block, we want to better understand Catalonia. What is Catalonia? So the first question we have for you is, do you consider Spain as a federal state or a central state?
Well, first of all, thank you for your invitation. Vous me permettez 2 mots en français? 2 mots en français, d'accord. Nous sommes à Paris, non? J'ai demandé, lorsque j'ai été invité si la conférence devait être, ou le colloque devait être en français ou en anglais. On m'a dit en anglais, absolument accepté, mais lorsque vous êtes à Paris, quand même 2 mots en français pour vous remercier de votre invitation et pour vous souhaiter à tous les élèves les meilleures chances pour l'avenir. The question was if Spain is a federal state or a central state. Yeah. And the answer is that it is neither a central state nor a federal state. So what is Spain then? I would say that it used to be a very centralized Spain, centuries and decades ago. When democracy was recovered 40 years ago, there was a huge transformation of Spain in all ways. And since then, Spain made an effort in order to return self-government to some nationalities within the state, within the Spanish state. One of these nationalities, in fact, one of these nations, was Catalonia. So Catalonia recovered some powers and a certain level of autonomy at the beginning of the 80s. But according to your question, in fact, the strict reality of Spain should be a plurinational country. And Spain doesn't recognize itself as a plurinational state. They say that they are similar to a federal state, but this is not true. In fact, there are autonomous communities there with a similar level of powers. But the reality is that the structure of Spain is not only one nation, but several nations. One of these nations is Castilla, the biggest one. The other is the Basque Country in the north. And the other one is the one that I represent, so Catalonia. Our struggle in order to achieve a plurinational state has not been successful, and this is why we are trying another way.
We're going to talk about it afterwards.
I guess so.
Okay, so we continue with the question about the Catalan culture. So for the people here who are not Catalan or Spanish, can you explain us the difference between the Catalan culture and the Spanish culture? And do you think that those two cultures should be considered as different?
Well, there is a Spanish culture and there is a Catalan culture, of course. Both stem from the Latin language and from the Romans and the Greeks. So there are a lot of similarities between the Spanish culture and the Catalan one. But to a certain extent, they are also different. And probably the biggest reason of this difference is the language. There is the Spanish language and the Catalan language. And the Catalan one language was initially spoken 8 centuries ago. Throughout our long history, we have found a lot of obstacles, a lot of problems in order to make this language survive. And we succeeded in maintaining the language, despite the big obstacles we found on the way. This shows that there is a real will from the Catalan people to keep its own culture, its own identity, and its own language. And the backbone of our culture is our language. This is why we are a bit different, because we have our own language. And when a country or a nation has its own language, then the culture is different, because precisely the language is the backbone of any culture.
Thank you. Last question of this first block. So, I don't know if you like football.
I'm fond of football, and more specifically, I'm a Barca supporter.
Could you explain us what is the importance of the FC Barcelona in Catalonia?
Well, how can I explain it to you? In our country, it has been said that, referring to Barca as the football club, it has been said that Barca is more than a club. It is a club, but according to a general acceptation in the country, we talk about Barca as an entity that is more than the entity itself. It's more than a club. Why? Probably because national and political reasons. When there was the very harsh dictatorship during 40 years, the Franco's dictatorship, Barca was a key element in order to convey messages that Catalonia was alive and that the Catalan identity was alive, and, very important, that we had a great ambassador of Catalonia everywhere in the world. This is why a lot of people identify themselves with this idea of an entity that was more than the entity itself. It was more than a club. Now, the situation is not exactly the same. We have democracy. We have a certain level of self-government. We are trying to increase this level of powers and self-government. I guess that we are going to speak about this idea just afterwards. But I would say that many people still identify Barca as something that is more than strictly a club. And right now, Barca is also one of the most reliable and remarkable ambassadors of Catalonia all over the world. And we are in good shape. We are in full swing. Well, touch me wood. What is here? This is not wood. This is especially wood. We will see what happens with the league. But in any case, Barca, as I said, is a key factor of the Catalan national structure.
I propose to move to block number 2, if you're all right. Stephanie will do the introduction about the block number 2. And I will change the slide.
Okay, so in the second block, we want to understand better what is the Catalan pro-independence movement. And I will start to present some recent key dates. So let's start in 2006, where the Spanish and Catalan government agreed to sign to update the Catalan constitution. However, 4 years later, in 2010, the court invalidated this new constitution. In 2012, you proposed a new fiscal pact for Catalonia, and again, this proposition was refused by the Spanish court. After that, Catalonia faced a series of demonstrations, gathering every time more than 1 million participants, from 2012 to 2015. In 2014, in November, you initiated a non-binding Catalan independence poll, and 2.4 million people participate to this poll, and the yes win this poll with more than 80%. And finally, in 2016, the coalition you created win the election, and you decided to apply a 18-month roadmap to independence. So now I let Agosti for the first question of this block.
Thank you so much. So now we talk about independency. So first question to ask, because there has been huge demonstrations going on in Barcelona in the last 4 or 5 years. So the first question that we have is a general question, is why the pro-independence movement is growing in Catalonia? What happened?
Why? The reason, probably the main reason, I would say, is that the majority of the Catalan people, 7.5 million people, as you said, the majority of these people reached the conclusion that if we followed the traditional ways to try to reach agreements with the central Spanish state, all these traditional ways would be blocked. We tried everything in the past. We cooperated with all the Spanish governments, conservative or socialist, right and left. We helped Spain when Spain had to face the biggest challenges in its history. For instance, joining the European Union. Or another example, joining the Euro. Or another example, fighting against terrorism. As you know, we had a very harsh terrorist movement in the north of the country that affected all our geography. Every time the Catalan political forces were there, helping the Spanish government to overcome these difficulties. On the other hand, we also tried to make understand that Catalonia, despite having a very mixed population, take into account that 70% of the people living in Catalonia have a non-Catalan origin, 70%. That's an amazing figure. And the composition and the structure, the demographic structure of our country is exactly like this one. This kind of country, when we understood that there were no ways to follow up with our movement for self-government, we had to change our strategy. And that happened 5 years ago, when, as you said, the Constitutional Court in Spain struck down the main and most sensitive parts of the Statute of Autonomy, the Constitution of Catalonia, that had been approved some years ago, in 2006. When we realized that there was no way, because the Constitutional Court said, you don't have the right to have this level of self-government, when we realized that fact, we changed, as I said, our strategy. And very important to keep in mind, people in Catalonia started these huge demonstrations. So, the movement, the political movement in Catalonia for the creation of a new state, for our own state, is a grassroots level movement. It is not something that has been decided in some private or public bureaus or offices. It has been driven by the people with these huge demonstrations you were talking about. And the responsibility of the political leaders have been to give a channel to these goals and to these aspirations of the majority of our people. So the main reason is, once we realize that the traditional ways to have our self-government are blocked, we have to change our strategy and we have to try a completely different way. And not an easy way. Believe me.
So you talk about the strategy of your political movement. Could you explain us what is the goal of the 18-month roadmap that you proposed? And could you be more specific about your ambitions?
In fact, let me add to your explanation that in September last year, we had parliamentary elections in the country, in Catalonia, and the political parties in favor of independence won the absolute majority of seats in the parliament, although we didn't reach the barrier of the 50% of the votes. So we have an absolute majority in the parliament, and this is something that allows us to go ahead. This is what we are doing right now. And going ahead means at least three things. The first one is to try to broaden the people, the majority of the people, in favor of the creation of a new Catalan state. We reached 48% of the votes last September. So in a next referendum or elections, we need to go above the 50%. So the first goal is to broaden this majority. The second goal is to prepare what we call the state structures. If the people decide in the future to go ahead, definitely, and to create the state, the structures of the state have to be prepared, ready. And the third goal is to start the preparation of the future Catalan constitution.
We have time for one last question, but we have to do it quick because we are run out of time. We're running out of time, especially because you have to take a flight at 8 p.m. You have to be in early at 8 p.m. So what are the different independency scenarios that you have on the table right now?
The different scenarios for the independent movement. The best case scenario would be to do exactly the same that the Scottish did some months ago, in September 2014. This is what we would like to do. A specific referendum, a binding specific referendum on independence. Because we don't really know if there is the real majority in Catalonia to go ahead. So the first step is to check, to verify if this majority exists or not. And this is something that you have to do through a referendum. This is the best way. And, let me add, the democratic way to face these kind of challenges. That would be the best case scenario. And we have fought a lot in order to reach this scenario, this referendum. But there has not been any possibility because the Spanish government has blocked everything, has denied us the possibility to talk about this subject, despite the huge demonstrations in our country, and despite the absolute majority we won in the Catalan Parliament some months ago. So there is no dialogue on this subject. There should be dialogue, and in accordance with what happened in the United Kingdom and in Scotland, an agreement should be reached between Catalonia and the Spanish state in order to hold a specific referendum. That would be the best case scenario. And the worst case scenario is always to do nothing. This is always the worst case scenario. Some people pretended that we did nothing, but that was not possible. So we tried to do something. We tried to give a specific channel to the aspirations of our people. May I introduce a sentence in French? Yeah.
And we will close this block.
And we will close this block. Okay. Un Français célèbre avait une phrase qui disait plus ou moins ce que je vais ajouter maintenant. Il disait toute personne qui dirige, qui fait quelque chose, a contre lui tous ceux qui veulent faire la même chose. Tous ceux qui font exactement le contraire. Et surtout, la grande armée des gens beaucoup plus sévères qui ne font rien. So, the worst case scenario is to do nothing.
And who said that?
Clarici.
I propose to move to block number 3. I think that we have an overall picture about the about Catalonia and the independency movement going on in Catalonia. Now let's talk about financing of Catalonia in the crisis in Spain. First of all, if we look at the figures of Catalonia within Spain, we can see that Catalonia in 2014 was about 90% of the GDP, of the total GDP of Spain, which is a very important figure. If we also take into account the number of unemployment in Catalonia, which is about 20%, compared to the 24% in Spain. In any case, too big, very, very high in both cases. Introducing these figures and knowing that most of financing coming from the Catalan government comes from Spain. In here we have different figures about the fiscal deficit, if it's done by the Catalan government or if it's done by the Spanish calculation. We're talking about 4% of GDP from the Spanish calculation compared to the 8% GDP of the Catalan calculation. Knowing these general figures, now it's time to ask questions about how Catalonia is financing and how to face the situation, the economic situation. So I leave the floor to Stephanie for the questions.
Thank you. So a very direct question is, who is currently financing Catalonia? Who is paying?
Who is currently financing Catalonia? The Spanish state with our taxes.
Can you explain a little bit more? Because
Yeah,
here we
it's easy to understand. If you are in charge of collecting taxes, you are the only one in the current circumstances able to finance other people. If you don't collect taxes, in the current circumstances, you ask for loans, nobody will give you a loan if you don't collect taxes. So the big challenge for us is to collect our taxes and not to stop the flow of solidarity towards other regions of Spain, because we have always said that we are not a selfish nation. We know that we have to help others to develop, but we also want to collect our taxes. And we have had serious and big problems to obtain loans, but because we don't collect our taxes. In fact, you were talking about the Catalan fiscal deficit. According to our figures, it's approximately 8% of our GDP every year. In the case of Catalonia, that means 15 billion euros every year. If this fiscal deficit was half, we wouldn't have any problem for our financing. And let me add that I was obliged as president to cut the Catalan budget by 15%. And we are responsible for healthcare, education, including universities, domestic security, so police, prisons, public transport, social services. believe me if I say that it is not easy to cut your budget by 15% if you are responsible for all these matters, for all these functions. But we did so because we knew that we were obliged, in fact, to reduce the budget, and that was a way to offset our public deficit. But the key point, the key element is to collect taxes. If you collect taxes, you don't have, if you collect taxes and you are a dynamic economy, and this is the case of Catalonia, you don't have problems to obtain loans.
Following what you said about the fiscal deficits, there is something that is quite difficult to understand from a foreign country. The numbers of the fiscal deficit from the Spanish government and the numbers from the Catalan government are different. How do you explain such a difference in the calculation?
And do you think that this is really so difficult to understand?
I mean, I try to understand the rationale behind that. But
you remember that there are lies, big lies, and statistics. Huh? Well, talking a little bit more seriously, I wouldn't say that it is quite logical or quite normal to have different figures when you calculate the Catalan fiscal deficit, but take into account that there are two different methods to calculate the fiscal deficit of a region, of a territory, or of a country. One of these methods is called the method of the benefits, and the other method is called the monetary method. Depending on which of both methods you use, the numbers are different. For instance, when we calculate the fiscal deficit in Catalonia, we always say that it is, as an average, 8% according to one of these methods. Usually, the Spanish government uses the other method. Let me also add that from the academic point of view, the agreed method everywhere is the one that is used by the Catalan government, not the one used by the Spanish government. So I would say that in this sense, we are similar to the calculation that other universities, governments, regional governments, state governments usually do in other countries or in other states. But anyway, it is clear that there is a fiscal deficit, and the attempt of the Catalan institutions is to reduce this fiscal deficit without cutting the flow of solidarity to other regions of Spain.
I propose to change to last block number 4. Now it's my time to change the slide. Whoop. So now we're going to the main topic about the conference about investing in Catalonia. So first of all, I would like to make a short introduction about how is the economy in Catalonia. So first of all, in general, these are general figures. The Catalan economy is about 3% of agriculture sector, 27%, close to 30% industry sector, and then the rest, which is about 70%, is related to services. When we focus about the industry sector, which is about 25% of the Spanish industrial GDP, then we can see that the most important sectors in the industry sector are food, chemicals, motor vehicles, SEAT is done in Barcelona, energy, Nissan too, energy, pharma, and then we have other, which are different sectors, which are less than 5%, which are within the other package, which is about 50%. So, and then also about the Catalan economy, it's very important. When we talk about the Catalan economy, we talk also about exportation. And Catalonia represents about 25% of exports in Spain. This is an approximation. And in the overall picture of Spain, 24% of export, I mean, the exportation represents 24% of Spanish GDP. So after, now what we see, after all these years, knowing that the crisis started in 2008 in Spain, now we can see also in the economy is recovering, not as fast as it will be, as it will be nice, but it is recovering, and we can see that in the number of companies created, for example. Knowing also that Catalonia represents about 17% out of the total of the companies created. Last year in Spain was about 3 million new companies created, and more than 500,000 in Catalonia. And for example, to compare that to Madrid, also close to 500,000. After this short introduction, we would like to ask some questions about investing in Catalonia. So I propose, Stephanie, that you start with the first question.
Okay, so what makes Catalonia a good place to invest, even regarding the actual economic context? Yeah.
Current economic context.
Why Catalonia is still a good place to invest?
Why it is a good place to invest? Some Spanish institutions and political leaders told us some years ago that if we started a political process for the constitution of a new Catalan state, everybody would leave our country. Everybody meaning all the foreign companies. Nobody would continue investing in Catalonia, and so on. The real facts are exactly the opposite way. We have political problems in Spain and in Catalonia, that's clear. We have been suffering a very harsh crisis. The Spanish public deficit skyrocketed years ago, and it is not easy to control it. So big problems on the table. But at the same time, it is also true that the Spanish and the Catalan economies are recovering. We are doing much better. The economic growth of Spain right now is one of the most dynamic in the European Union, more than 3% last year. The unemployment rate is, in the end, going down. That's our main challenge, the most important one. And in this context, the question is, what has happened with the foreign investments in Catalonia? For instance, last year, let me remember that we had plebiscitary elections. So the political debate was present every day. What happened last year in Catalonia? Catalonia, according to the Financial Times FDI markets, was the fourth region in all Europe, not in the European Union, in all Europe, for foreign investment attraction. And the first in continental Europe, because the leading region in Europe was a British region, the second was Scotland, the third was a region in Russia, so quite far from here, and the fourth, Catalonia. So we did a little bit better than in La France. Not bad. And the area of London.
Not the best place to say that, by the way.
I know. Well, it's a joke. Huh? But, that was the reality last year. And if you compare the foreign investments in 2014 with the foreign investments in 2015, you would realize that the growth would be the growth was 52%. 1 year comparing with the year after. No? So the conclusion is quite clear. There is a dynamism in the attraction of foreign investment in Catalonia. Barcelona is a very attractive city right now. We succeeded years ago in winning the nomination for the World Mobile Congress and the World Mobile Capital. That's mobile technologies. That is attracting a lot of young people to the area of Barcelona. We competed with Munich, Paris, and Milano when we had to win this bet years ago. So I would say that there are many factors of attraction right now, and despite the situation of our economy that has been with big difficulties in the last years, right now the investors are still going to Catalonia more than ever. This is a very important point. And of course, the policy of the Catalan government and the attitude of the Catalan government is to be a business-friendly government in order to continue attracting this kind of investments.
So one more question, because we were talking about exports before. Why Catalonia is on top exports in Spain compared to our other regions? What makes it export more than the rest? In Spain, but not in Europe. And our goal is not to be compared with the rest of Spain, but the most dynamic exporting regions or countries of Europe. This is our goal and our challenge. 30 years ago, Catalonia was not an export economy. So this is a work that we have been done during the last 3 decades. And things have changed in a positive way. When you were comparing our figures and explaining our figures, you said that we represent 16% of the Spanish population, 19% of the Spanish GDP, but 25% of the Spanish general exports and 28% of the Spanish imports. So the Catalan economy is clearly more foreign-oriented than the rest of the economies in the Spanish state. And as I said, this is something that has been done in the last 3 decades. In the right way. Our level of exports last year accounted for 1/3 of our GDP. If you take into account that the sales to the rest of Spain could also be considered exports if Catalonia was an independent country, then our level of openness would be approximately 65-70%. And this is something that you can compare with other very open European economies. So we are on the right way. We are on the right path. But we have to still working in this sense, because when you have a small economy, Catalonia, 32,000 square kilometers, 7.5 million people, this is not a big country. When you have a small economy, you need to open it if you want to turn it into a dynamic economy. And this is our challenge.
Thank you very much. So we close this session. And thank you for giving us your opinion about the Catalan political situation, the Catalan economy, and finally the foreign investment in Catalonia. So now we would like to invite you to ask some questions, and I will come with the mic for those who have questions.
We have people from India, we have people from China, we have people from Europe. So it will be very good to have your insights and your opinion on the different points. And if you have now, you have a very good opportunity to ask questions to Mr. Mas.
Hello, everyone. Hola, President. My name is Arnau. I'm from Catalonia, so I have a lot of questions to ask to my president. Only one, okay. For me, I think the president really explains really well what is going on in Catalonia, and it's great that in HEC we are more aware about this thing, because every time in class they ask me where you're from, and I say Catalonia, nobody understands why I say Catalonia, not Spain. So now you understand more or less why. But apart from that, I would like to ask you your personal opinion about the trends that says that the pro-independence movement is going down and not up. Because as you said, one of the main objectives of your government is to extend and promote the Catalan movement pro-independence across all the Catalan citizenships. So thank you. Gracias y bon viatge.
Moltes gràcies. Thank you very much. 3-4 years ago, people in favor of independence in Catalonia were about 20%. In September last year, when we held the Catalan elections, the political parties in favor of independence got a support of 48% of the votes. So in a short period of time, only 3 years, that's a very short period of time in political terms, for great movements. In 3 years, the situation has dramatically changed in the country. It was 20%, now it's 48%. Of course, 48% is a bit below the 50%. And to go above 50% is a key element for the future. But let's say the evolution of this political movement is very clear and to a certain extent quite strong. Of course, when we face so many difficulties, there are people in Catalonia that think that this is something that we are not going to achieve. And probably they stay at home, or they are skeptical about this possibility. But usually things change with the passing of the year, and there are specific moments in which people understand that there is again another reaction in favor of the movement. But despite these seasonal, I would say, attitudes of several people, the main point is the change of mentality of a lot of people in the country. And this change of mentality has happened. It's obvious. The pro-independence movement is not too strong to achieve all the goals in the short term, but it is enough strong to continue the roadmap.
Okay, first.
Thank you very much. First, I wanted to say thanks that it's good to have you here to debate this, because it's a very important topic for Spaniards. And you said that the most democratic way is to hold a referendum in Catalonia, to ask the people from Catalonia. I completely agree with that. But I also believe that, don't you believe that also the rest of people in Spain have something to say? Because today, Catalonia has always been a region of Spain. So I believe that the rest of the people in Spain have also something to say about a part of their country. Thanks.
Well, I don't fully agree with the idea of Catalonia has always been a region of Spain. I would have said Catalonia has been a nation with 1,000 years of history, that 5 centuries ago, thanks to a marriage between the Catholic kings, got unified, and since then, got unified but with 2 kingdoms, separate kingdoms, and at the beginning of the 18th century, in the Succession War, in 1714, we lose our powers, we lose our laws, we lose our constitutions, and Castilla had a great military victory then, and started to apply a mighty power on the Catalan shoulders. I would have said that, but you can think in other terms, of course. If you understand that Catalonia is a real nation, not because historical reasons, but because there is a general will in Catalonia of the Catalan people to recognize themselves as a nation, this is the most important point. Then, if you're a nation, there is a democratic principle. It's not a legal principle always, but it's a democratic principle that you can decide your political future if you are a nation. Of course, it would be true if you say that Spain has not recognized the Catalan nation in the Spanish constitution. But that this is the big mistake, according to our view and our mentality. It was not possible when the democracy in Spain was recovered some decades ago, but you have to accept the realities. And if the reality is that Catalonia is a nation, it would be better for Spain to recognize that fact and to put it in the Spanish constitution. That would be a solution. But this is something right now impossible in Spain, because the biggest political Spanish parties refuse the idea of recognizing Catalonia as a nation within Spain. Canada recognized Quebec as a nation, and they are together. And the British people recognize Scotland as a nation, and they are still together. But the Spanish institutions don't recognize Catalonia as a nation. And many Catalan people want to create their own state, because there is not a respectful attitude from the Spanish institutions. And it could be different. It should be different. But it is just the way it is. That's just the way it is. So, in my opinion, this is my view, and I think that we agree in these terms. The best solution would be a specific referendum on independence, a binding referendum. If the yes vote wins, then there has to be a negotiation between Catalonia and the rest of Spain. So at that time, the Spanish people would have their say. But at that time, the first step is to know the opinion of the Catalan people. When the British accepted the referendum in Scotland, they didn't ask to vote in all the United Kingdom. They understood that the vote had to take place in Scotland. And after the vote, if the yes vote wins, then you have to sit down at the table and negotiate everything. This is our proposal. But all our attempts in order to reach this point have been blocked by the Spanish government, unfortunately.
Bona tarda, President. Good evening. My name is Sarah. I'm a PhD student in international public law. I just wanted to know, on a more pragmatic point of view, you said that there is going to be an 18 months process, because I believe, as we kind of all, I think, realize that there is no possible negotiation with Spain, and therefore there is no possible binding referendum, because if there was, it would have been binding already. So could you be more specific on how it's going to work these 18 months, and eventually is it going to be a unilateral declaration of independence at the end? And if so, do you have any clues of which countries in Europe and on a more international point of view are going to actually recognize Catalonia as a state? And so do you have...
Okay.
This is a very wide question.
Very wide, but the answer will be very short, but with direct messages in order to try to answer in the right way. First, my first opinion. We said 18 months, not because 18 months is written in the Bible. It is not the case. But because it was the period of time that the Scottish agreed with the British in order to build all the state structures and to agree everything. These are very sophisticated and complicated subjects. So you need a certain period of time in order to deal with the other government and to reach agreements. That was the idea of the 18 months. So that means that if instead of 18 months we talk about 16 or 20, nothing will happen. It's an orientative period of time. Second message. We are going to insist on the idea of a binding referendum agreed with the Spanish institutions, because this is the right way. This is what we want. We don't want unilateral declarations of independence, if we can avoid them. Third message. We know for certain that a unilateral declaration of independence cannot be approved if you don't have a broad majority of people asking for independence. And this is not yet the case. We have 48% of supporters in Catalonia, but if we want an independent state within the European Union and within the euro, this is our position, we need to be clearly above the 50% of the votes. If one day we reach this figure, this level, more than 50% of the votes, and the Spanish state continue to refuse any possibility of dealing together in order to reach agreements, then we will ask the European institutions to help us. Of course, because you cannot think about the possibility of being in this situation for decades. This is something that will have to be worked out. Three messages.
Mr. President, thanks. First of all, perhaps a harsh business question. Your path toward independence bear a lot of uncertainty about if Catalonia will stay in euro or not. So how during this transition period you could bring and continue to bring external and international investment in Catalonia? Thanks.
Just to make it clear, the question is, assuming that Catalonia is not within the European Union, how is going to manage the transition phase during the period?
In fact, almost, but we have an uncertainty about whether the Catalonia will stay in Euro or will leave Euro.
So the question is, what are the scenarios? What will do Catalonia in case of independence within the Euro?
And how continue to attract business during this transition and with all this uncertainty?
It's absolutely clear. The great majority of the people in Catalonia want to stay in the European Union and in the Euro. There are some anarchists that would prefer to be out of the European Union and out of the Europe. But this is not the case of the majority of the Catalan people. If Catalonia has to leave the European Union, that would mean that Spain recognizes the independence of Catalonia. Because otherwise, we would be in the European Union and in the Euro. But in my opinion, this is not a feasible scenario for the future. Because if there is an agreement between Spain and Catalonia, what would be the reason to send Catalonia out of the European Union? If we are in, it would be absolutely silly for Catalonia, for Spain, and for the rest of the European Union. And adult people try not to do silly things. They try. That sometimes they do silly things, but not always. No? So if there is an agreement, the outcome is clear. Catalonia would remain in the European Union and in the Euro, of course, doing all the legal adjustments in order to fit in the new political and legal circumstances. If there is no agreement, my view is that this is an impossible scenario. Because if there is no agreement, Catalonia creates its own state without taking its part of the Spanish public debt. So Spain would lose 20% of its GDP and would increase 20% of its public debt. And that scenario would be a European crisis and a crisis for the euro. Who wants that? Nobody. So the non-agreement scenario is not a real scenario. It is something that people use in order to fear the Catalan people and to try to convince them not to say yes to independence. This is my view.
Okay, thank you very much. We will close this session. So thank you very much for coming in HEC Paris.
Thank you.
And so we would like to invite you to share some food and wine. We have also some Catalan champagne.
What kind of wine?
Catalan
wine? Okay.
We have some French wines, but we have also some Catalan wines.
A very good wine.
I propose you to take a family picture with Andrea, Mr.